What is going on, everybody? I am back. We're not going to be talking Seahawks in this video. This is going to be a little bit of a review of Black Monday, just kind of going over the coaches that have been fired, where I think maybe these teams will look to go. If these coaches actually deserve to be fired or not, we'll talk a little bit about that, and maybe talk about the future of some of these teams. It's not just Seahawks talk here. I am always willing to talk every NFL team. So let's quickly get into it. Honestly, a pretty low-key Black Monday. Doesn't mean it's not over. Doesn't mean there isn't some things that can happen. We'll talk about some teams that could still take and make gearing things outside there and make some moves. So far, the coaching vacancies we have right now are the Panthers, the Texans, the Cardinals, the Broncos, and the Colts. I don't know if I did repeat them there. The Panthers, Texans, Cardinals, Broncos, and Colts are the openings right now. There are some other teams we'll get into that could have some openings, but those are the major ones right now. Matt Rule, Frank Reich, and Nathaniel Hackett were all fired in season. I think you can make a case for all of them. I think Frank Reich is probably the only one that you could say maybe had some not controversy, but the only one where maybe he deserved to stay. The other two, Rule and Hackett, were kind of a mess. And then today, Houston parted ways with Lovie Smith, and the Cardinals parted way with Cliff Kingsbury. For the Cardinals, Steve Keim also stepped down as GM. If he didn't step down, I don't know if he would have kept the job anyways, but Steve Keim did step down. Nick Caserio stays in as general manager for the Texans. So they're going to go ahead and make another hiring there. That'll be their fourth coach in 4 years. Honestly, the only one that I think would even need some explanation here is Houston. I don't think anybody has any shock that Cliff Kingsbury was let go or any of them. Lovie Smith was one that I think, and it's a tough one, because honestly, I think it's wrong. I don't think Lovie Smith deserved to be fired. I don't think David Culley deserved to be fired last year. This is not a good Texans roster, though it does have some young talent. It showed some signs of improvement. I don't think any coach would have won with this roster this year. With that said, I also don't think David Culley or Lovie Smith are the guys that are going to get this team to a Super Bowl. There's a lot of good candidates out there. Guys like, now guys like Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, are becoming hot names. You know what I mean? Gannon, the Eagles D coordinator, their offensive coordinator. Sean Payton's out there. So there's tons of big names out there that these teams are going to be looking at. And like I said, I don't think that Lovie Smith was the guy. I don't think he is going to be in anybody's consideration to be an NFL head coach. I think he's a good football guy. I think he's a good person, but I don't think he's the best head coach. I think he got the most he could out of the players, and that's commendable. But I don't see Lovie Smith hoisting a Lombardi. But it's also tough because I don't think Lovie Smith did anything deserve being fired either. I thought the team played pretty hard in Houston. He seems like a guy that's probably very well respected in the locker room. And sometimes that's all you ask for. You know what I mean? That can sometimes be enough. So kind of a tough firing there. It's a weird one because, I don't think he deserved to be fired. And I don't like what the Texans are doing in terms of firing a coach. All these one-and-dones, I don't think sets a good precedent. But I also don't think that David Culley or Lovie Smith were the long-term answers either. And I think what they're trying to do, I would guess, is that the Texans think as they get closer, and now that they have, essentially their pick of any quarterback they want in this draft, that it's going to be much more attractive to a guy like a Ben Johnson that is considered a young, up-and-coming head coach that could be someone that is hoisting a Lombardi one day. It becomes a much more attractive job than it was before. So you got your couple years of placeholders, and now you look for someone that you think can take this franchise in the next direction. With that said, though, I still think they did Lovie a little dirty. So that's kind of how I feel on that. The firing, I don't like it because I don't think Lovie deserved to be fired, but I also don't think he's the right guy for the job, so I understand why he was fired. The rest of them, like I said, they're all pretty self-explanatory. The Panthers are, and I think now let's look at the guys. The Panthers, Broncos, and Colts all went with interim coaches throughout the year. Jeff Saturday, still Steve Wilkes and Rosberg or something for the Broncos. That guy's not getting the job. In fact, I don't even think he's he was someone that was hired as like a consultant, and I think they just kind of gave him the job so everybody else could focus on their, areas and not have to move around too much. He will not be getting the job there. Steve Wilks and Jeff Saturday will both be interviewing for the head coaching positions. I don't think Saturday has any chance in Indianapolis. That team was a mess. He started out great, won that first game in Vegas, and then that was a absolute disaster in Indianapolis. If you told me closing out the year that was the worst team in football, yeah, I would agree. You could put them at 32nd in a power rankings, and I would not bat an eye at you at all for doing that. Steve Wilks, different story. The Panthers played pretty tough under Wilks. That was a team that a lot of people had as the worst team in the league, for the beginning of the season with Matt Rule, and they actually turned it around. They came close to winning the division. They were a couple minutes away from winning in Tampa from probably winning the division. I think Wilks is kind of another guy like very well respected. I don't know if he's a coach that's going to take you over the top, but he certainly got the most out of those guys and did a nice job. He probably has a legitimate chance to get that head coaching job. Out of all the interims, he's the only one I think that could legitimately get the job. Now, there's some other teams let's talk about that could still make head coaching moves. Just because Black Monday has passed doesn't mean that there aren't going to be changes. The obvious ones happen Black Monday, but there's other ones that have discussions that still take place and things that can happen. I know, for instance, when the Seahawks fired Jim Mora in 2009, it happened like a week later. I think they wanted to make sure they could get Pete Carroll before they made any sudden moves. So some of the ones that there's a couple I'm going to have as kind of wild cards here that you might not expect. And then some ones that, I think we all agree are going to be maybe up in the air. First one is the Rams, and that's obviously not Sean McVay being fired. He would not be let go. It's the chance that Sean McVay steps down. He flirted with retiring after last season and has flirted with again this year. I don't know if McVay's just burnt out or what's going on. He's only 36. The future isn't necessarily the brightest with the Rams. They don't have a lot of draft picks. It's an older roster. I mean, you could be seeing Matt Stafford and Aaron Donald both retire. If that's the case, who knows what's going to happen with Cooper Kupp and Jalen Ramsey. So this is definitely a roster, and it does not have a lot of draft picks. Probably thank goodness for them that the Panthers turned down their offer of Brian Burns, because otherwise it would be an even bigger mess. But definitely a lot of retooling to do. I think McVay is still a very smart and capable offensive coach. But you know what? I mean, the guy's got a ring. You do you. So obviously that's going to be one to watch if McVay steps down. It sounds like Dennis Allen will be back in New Orleans. That was one that I think was maybe up for debate. I don't think Allen necessarily did anything wrong this year, but he kind of falls to me in that Lovie Smith, Steve Wilks category of like, is that the guy that's going to get you over the top? Necessarily. But it sounds like Allen will be back. Washington with Ron Rivera would be one to watch for. Another guy, I think Ron Rivera is a good football guy. I think he's really good at kind of taking you from bad to competitive, but I don't know if Ron Rivera can take this team over the top, and they still don't have a quarterback in place there, so we'll see. That would be one to keep an eye on. I don't think Arthur Smith will be let go in Atlanta, but that's maybe one. That's going to be a seat that's hot next year, would be my guess. They're going to have to start winning pretty soon here in Atlanta. I like Arthur Smith. I think he's a smart offensive guy, but he just hasn't utilized Kyle Pitts. Some of the draft picks have been a little questionable. I know he's not a defensive guy, but the defense is still not very good, and they don't have an answer at quarterback. Desmond Ridder didn't prove it. Maybe he's the guy going in, but he certainly hasn't proven to be the number one guy there. A couple teams that are in the playoffs that would be interesting to see when it's all said and done. And that's two teams that are playing each other this week. And that's Todd Bowles and Mike McCarthy. If the Bucs lose to Dallas, let's say they lose and they lose ugly, I mean, that's an 8-10 record for Todd Bowles. You've got, the chance of Tom Brady retiring. You've got a team that's not in very good cap position. You've got some big names that are impending free agents. And Brady's an impending free agent. So forget retiring. I mean, he could just go somewhere else too. And like I said, it's not a team that's in great cap shape. I don't think Todd Bowles is a great head coach. I think he's a well-respected guy. Again, I feel like a broken record saying that, and certainly a good defensive coach. But I don't know about Todd Bowles long-term as the head coach of the Buccaneers. And if they lose, especially if something bad here to Dallas, you're looking at a team going 8-10. I mean, any other year, that's probably not going to win you divisions. So, is that a move that has to be made, with Todd Bowles? And it would just be something to discuss. And then Mike McCarthy on the other side. Certainly a rough first year, but that was, without Dak Prescott. Andy Dalton came in and struggled. They win the division last year, but they get eliminated by San Francisco in the wild card round. And then now you've got this year where another great season, certainly, but you don't win the division. That's not necessarily all their fault. The Eagles just had a tremendous year. Cowboys would have won probably any other division. But, again, if you go to Tampa and lose this game, which I think is possible, it's a wild card exit for the Cowboys. Is that good enough? For Jerry Jones is going to look at 3 years with Mike McCarthy and no playoff wins. McCarthy been rumored each year to be kind of on the chopping block. So I wouldn't put it past Mike McCarthy to be on the hot seat there if they don't get at least one playoff win. I know there's been some talk about Mike McDaniel. I think that's more to do with the Tua situation. I'm not going to get into that. I don't think Mike McDaniel will be let go. I think he'll be there next year. And I'm trying to just go through the playoff matchups real quick. I don't see any other coach in the playoffs that would be on the hot seat. There are some coordinators that were fired. I think there are some seats that will be warm next year. I think Kevin Stefanski's seat in Cleveland is going to be warm. A lot of pressure on him now. With Deshaun Watson having a full year, he'll be on the hot seat next year. Honestly, I think he's a good guy, and I think Mike Vrabel's seat might be a little bit warm next year. To be honest, after the disappointing finish this year, they've got quarterback questions. I think Josh McDaniel's seat is very warm. I think they played a little bit better at the end of the year in Vegas. That helped them, but I think that's a very warm seat. Just trying to go through in my head if I miss somebody. I don't think anybody else. Let's see, going to the East, no. Central, I mean, technically, they finished the year great. If Detroit struggles next year, Dan Campbell's seat might be a little warm. I mean, then you get into year 3 of not making the playoffs. Not saying that's the case, but that's a seat that could be warm. I hate to say that after what they did for Seattle, and everyone's raving about them right now. But if something goes wrong next year, you're looking at 3 years of no playoffs. That seat's going to get warm. If the Bears, don't get something going, I think he'll get at least one more year. But Matt Eberflus might have a little warm seat. I think Matt LaFleur's seat is going to be interesting. I don't think he's necessarily on the hot seat, but depending on what Aaron Rodgers does here, I think that's going to make for an interesting dynamic in Green Bay. That's not really a hot seat, but I do think that could get interesting here. So that's the thing, kind of, I guess, a Black Monday review and a state of the franchises. In terms of which jobs do I think are the best, obviously I'm not going to look at the ones we debate. It's just going to be Panthers, Texans, Cardinals, Broncos, and Colts, the only jobs that are open. I think the most attractive job there, it's got to be in some regards the Texans. They're in a pretty good cap situation. They've got some good young talent. I don't think Casario's done a terrible job there. You don't have the number 1 pick, but, I mean, if you want Bryce Young, you should be able to maybe get him. I mean, the Bears have the number 1 pick, so someone could trade up with the Bears and take him, so that does hurt you, but for the most part, you're going to have your pick of the litter of talent. Like I said, you've got got a franchise left tackle, Laremy Tunsil. You've got some good pieces in place there. 2 first-round picks, actually, because you got Cleveland's as well. So I think that's actually a very attractive job. It's not a high-maintenance job. It's not like you're going to New York where that, 1 year of losing and the scrutiny's on you. Now, they've fired 2 coaches in 2 years, and they're going to be on their 4th head coach in 4 years. That's not really attractive. But I think if you're someone like a Ben Johnson, I keep bringing that name up, you're going to know you're not going to be a one-and-done coach there. After the Texans, I'm honestly going to say the Cardinals. I still think there's something in Kyler Murray. I still think you're intrigued by that prospect of getting to coach him and maybe get something out of him. I don't think it's the roster's not great. It's really bad in the trenches in Arizona. But I do think there's some stuff to look at there. They're not necessarily in like draft capital hell. Like they've got opportunities to get out to build through the draft. You could make a case you've got your quarterback. Now he's going to get expensive. If you don't like Kyler Murray, it's not a great place to go. In fact, it might be one of the worst ones. But if you're someone that sees some upside in Murray, it is a somewhat attractive job. I would say the Panthers is probably next, mainly because of the division. Like, you figure Tampa might be losing Brady next year. They're going to drop off. Carolina they're kind of the opposite of Arizona. They're good in the trenches, so you've got a lot of pieces in place there. I actually think Carolina might be more attractive than Arizona. The Colts is kind of a mess, but you got the number 4 or 3 pick in the draft. 4, I think. And Arizona, that's the other thing. Arizona's got number 3 pick in the draft as well. Colts at number 4. There is some talent there. But, man, in the quarterback position, you've got to draft. You can't keep doing this 1 year with guys. They're going to have to draft somebody and develop them. But I actually think Jim Irsay, despite all the craziness, actually a pretty good owner. So I actually don't think it's a bad spot to end up. Denver's a bit of a mess. The upside to Denver is that it's similar to Arizona in the sense of, like, if you can tap into Russell Wilson and find what made him really good, I don't think you're that far away from maybe getting this team back to competitive. But here's the problem with Denver versus Arizona. Now, Russell Wilson's a lot older than Kyler Murray, so you're dealing with a quarterback that just may not have it anymore. Now, Arizona's going to deal with a tough division as well, but, I mean, Denver's dealing with an even tougher division. Even if you do turn it around, I mean, you still might be the 4th best team in the division. Maybe you can get above the Raiders, but the Chargers and Chiefs are, already better than you. So, I mean, you're going to, and the AFC in general, Josh Allen in Buffalo, Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, Kenny Pickett looks like the answer in Pittsburgh. Jacksonville's now on the rise with Trevor Lawrence. The Jets, Jets get like a David Carr, or is it Derek Carr? David Carr? Wow, Derek Carr. Oh my gosh. Derek Carr or someone, that's a playoff team. A full healthy season of Tua. Miami's good. You still got Belichick, you still got Harbaugh in Baltimore. You've got a full year of Deshaun Watson and Cleveland. The AFC is loaded. So that's why Denver to me. And then you have a first round pick, but it's Miami's, which was San Francisco's first round pick. So you could be picking 32nd, which is fine. It's better than nothing. But you don't have the draft capital to rebuild that thing. So it'll be interesting to see. My dog's barking to go check out what's going on. Thank you all for watching. Please like, please comment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I truly appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great day.